Now broadcasting.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we've got it working. Good morning, everyone. For those of you that haven't attended a commercial coffee before, we're glad to have everybody joining us. I'm excited to have this panel that we've put together. A couple of housekeeping items I wanted everyone to know about. First off, if you haven't been part of our commercial coffee events, this is, I believe, the fifth or sixth year we've been doing them in Charlottesville. It's our first virtual one, so that should be interesting. We've been doing them for about 15 years out of our corporate office, and so it's been a nice addition here to do periodically. One of the things that I wanted to draw everyone's attention to, or at least inform everyone of, is we've really tried to, during this time with everybody sort of being out of work, give everybody the opportunity to pick up some professional development credits. So if you are looking for AIA credits, PDH credits, HSW credits, APA credits, I'd encourage you to go take a look at our website. If you go to www.timmons.com, up in the top, you'll see a news and events link, and from there, you could find some of the items we're offering pretty much on a weekly basis if that's a need for you. Want to thank again all of the panelists that we have here today: John Pritzlaff with Cushman Wakefield, Chris Engel with the City of Charlottesville, Robert Wood with United Bank, Deborah Van Eersel with the UVA Foundation, and Roger Johnson with County of Albemarle. Grateful to have Valerie here as our co-host. Valerie, I'll turn it over to you and we'll get started.
Great, thanks Craig, and welcome. Looks like we may have a few people who are still joining us, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone, it's nice to be here and obviously to co-host these events with Timmons Group. Craig, I can't believe it's been 5 years, but it's been a lot of fun, and I think we've had good opportunities to network and get to know a lot more people in the development and construction and design side of the field, and give people opportunities to tour new buildings and sites that have been developed, and we look forward to getting to do that live and in person again soon, because we know there's a lot of cool projects that are coming together. So yeah, thanks. I know that we've got a big group and we have a lot of exciting topics to get to, so we'll go ahead and jump off. One of the things we were discussing that we thought might be of interest to everybody was for our panelists to talk about how real estate development might be changing given the COVID pandemic and everything that we've been through over the past few months based on their particular perspectives. And so we thought we'd start with Chris and Roger from the public sector and their economic development efforts and initiatives, and then we'll shift over to Robert and Johnny for the sort of the private sector perspective. So Chris, you want to go ahead and tell us from your perspective, how have things changed? How do you think it's going to change going forward, as best you can predict based on what you're seeing out there?
So yeah, it's a really good question. I think one that all of us are interested in, particularly a local jurisdiction that gets 60% of its revenues from the real estate tax base. Obviously that's of concern. And I have perspectives and thoughts. Don't know that we have answers for sure, given where we are in this unusual situation. But I think, the pandemic situation puts us almost in direct conflict with the prevailing trends of the past 15 years with respect to what we've seen in the city, what we've seen in this region, what we've seen across the country, which is a continued investment and growth of urban to, medium to large size cities with people repopulating cities, living in cities, working in cities, 24/7 type environments, which we have seen right here in Charlottesville. And that's been a good trend. It's been a positive trend. But the pandemic and social distancing creates a situation where, okay, don't come to work, stay at home, work from home. Don't have those happy collisions whereby these inspirations and creativity can happen that we've been kind of using in the economy throughout the past 15 years or so. So it creates a unique situation where we're going to see what happens. Does the built environment start to change because of this? Or is this just simply a minor interruption, that we then return to the prevailing trend of kind of growing and building and being more dense and being connected to one another in city environments. So I don't have the answer. I think that it'll be interesting to watch what happens and where it happens. Obviously, Charlottesville is one of the more dense locations in the state, but we're nowhere near the most dense cities in the world, like a New York or a Beijing or places like that. So it'll be interesting to see where we fall in that scale in terms of what the comfort level is here of investors, of the workforce, of company leadership in terms of how they may want to change or may not want to change their working environments. And I guess the last thing I'll just add on this first question is, if the built environment does change and if companies decide that work from home is a good thing, so what happens to that capital that previously went to building the real estate projects, capital investment in industrial, office, retail, that type of thing? Where does that go? It needs to go somewhere, and it will go somewhere. What does that change look like? I'm interested in kind of hearing other thoughts as well. So I'll leave it at that and pass it on to Roger.
Morning, Valerie. Thank you for hosting us.
Sure, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. So real estate has been changing in Albemarle County, and I think I'll give some specific examples, as I feel like that illustrates how things have changed better than my own personal opinions. We have some major development projects in different phases, and they're all moving forward at different rates. And specifically, we have Mullen Mills, which is in the Broadway quarter. That project is near completion, and Brian Roy, the developer there, expects to have the CO in short order. So that project was already underway, and it proceeded to completion or near completion. Newtown Crozet, who has a project in downtown Crozet that's going through the development process, and they're currently in review with VDOT, trying to get the street grids moving. It's moving forward. And then there's a recent public-private partnership we have with Albemarle Business Campus and Kyle Redinger and some other partners. And that project is continuing to move through the early part of the process. And I tell you that story to say that development projects that were already in the pipeline are continuing to move forward. Conversely, Albemarle County has, while the inspections and the numbers of approvals continue to come in, there have been some large development projects that were in the pipeline that have frozen, if you will. A couple of those were in the opportunity zones. Our team reaches out to opportunity zone investors as well as other just private investors. And what we've seen happen in the pipeline, although it's a limited sample size and not generalizable, is that these projects have frozen, if you will. It's evident that the investors' risk tolerances have changed. And so these private equity and opportunity zone funds have sort of slowed down the movement of the pipeline of projects. However, each one of those folks that we spoke with expect that there will be some return to normalcy, and these groups of projects will move forward in the future. So I say all that to say, Valerie, that I think the projects are building up. And while there may not be an avalanche of projects coming down the pipeline, many of those will begin to evolve and move back into the economy.
Well, that's good news. Thanks for the update. It's encouraging. Robert, tell us about you. Robert's been kind enough to take a break from processing 2,000 or so loans per day, PPP loans, over the last couple of weeks. He can give us some more specifics, but thanks for taking the time to be here, Robert, and share your unique perspective with us.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And yes, the PPP loans for all bankers have been exhausting, but for such a great cause. The number of phone calls, emails we've received, and I know every bank out there, of people saying, hey, I get to bring these employees back, or, hey, I was going to furlough all these people and now I don't have to. That's just, it's great. It's a wonderful thing to see. And so it's been worth all the time and effort. Just a few statistics on the PPP loans as a whole. There were 1.66 million loans done in round one for $342 billion. about an average of 206,000 per loan. Now, this second round, there's already 2.44 million applications for only 183 billion. So the average is way down, which is good news, because the complaint of the first go round was that not enough small businesses actually received the funds. So we're down to 75,000 per loan, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see, and the money's lasting longer this time, which is really nice. So I mean, as it goes, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. I know that we as a bank are closing more loans per day sometimes than we do in anywhere from 3 to 4 months. And I know it's the same out there for everybody else. It's a lot of work. But again, it's for a great cause. On the development side, we're still seeing things move. We're very, very grateful as an industry that the governor considered construction an essential business. Had those shut down, these problems would have been a lot worse. So, as Roger said a minute ago, right, it's nice to see projects that were already in the works continue moving, and a lot of them are moving faster and at a under budget, which is great. I know even some of the the new home construction stuff that we've been seeing is still moving fairly well. Now, I think as we look into the future, we're going to see that start to slow down, right? Obviously, you can't have the same amount of people can't do the open houses the same way. They have to go in and clean after every single open house. So those who figured out how to do online open houses will win that game for the future. But at least for right now, things are still moving, and we're happy to see that. So I think in all, the biggest thing that we've seen is that there's a little bit more risk, and we're going to be a little bit more leery. Johnny and I were talking about this yesterday of new retail heavy developments, but I'm pleased to see that we're not tightening a lot of things. Loan to values, general metrics, they're staying the same. Sure, are we going to do a little more sensitivity analysis? We are. Are we going to get out there and make sure that we understand the viability of the tenants? Yes. But at the end of the day, we're still actively lending, as are most banks out there. So it's great to hear.
Absolutely. Very good news. Johnny, hopefully you're not going to spoil the party. You're going to have some good news for us as well. But I know you talked about things vary a lot by sector. So I think people would probably be really interested to hear what you're seeing in your markets and how things might be different in the various sectors, because we know you cover everything.
Yeah, so it's really sector by sector. I think the interest rate drop has really kind of carried some pre-development stuff through at a pretty decent pace. I think anything with retail is a dead stop. I think a lot of leasing, both in office and retail, hit pause. I think office leasing, you see, people that really have a need to move, they're still continuing with their projects and their leases. I think on the retail side, the whole industry shut down. The active people really are using this, and they're being opportunistic, which is to be expected. Obviously the market shifted in retail pretty dramatically. I think the big risk going forward is a lot of the mom and pop retailers trying to get their stores back open, and the PPP did help them a little bit, but they still have to figure out how to open their restaurants and their shops again when they're allowed to. And a lot of people are going to have a lot of trouble opening at 25 or 50%. I think it's going to be a difficult process for them to really try to figure out if they're even going to make money at that amount of people. So I think it's definitely positive ahead, but we're going to have a lot of, run 5 steps forward and then realize that we've got to slow down and take 2 or 3 steps back to really make sure that people, aren't getting over their skis too much. As far as the projects go, the fact that we were able to keep the projects going and keep building them was great. We basically would have had really big banking problems, and restructuring of loans and a lot of interest payments going up if we had stopped the projects. And so we were able to keep those going forward. I think, there's some projects that we're going forward that are reconsidering how they develop some parts of their projects. I think this goes back to retail, will probably contract pretty substantially. Nationally, you see about 24 square feet per person. And I think we're going to see that go down to more of like an 18, 19, 20 square feet per person, just because this was a big, big shift and a big disruptor to that industry. But overall, I think it's good. I think we're going to see things pick back up. And I don't think it's going to be as fast as everybody wants it to be. Of course, my lens is very focused on specific things. I think the retail, which is a large part of our, economic viability, certainly in Charlottesville, we live on tourism, we live on UVA. And if you don't have sales tax, obviously you're going to have a lot of problems at the jurisdictional level. And if we don't have, people eating out and being vibrant as much as they were, it's just going to take a while to get the vibrancy back. But overall, I think we have a lot of, really, really optimistic developers here in Charlottesville, and they're going to keep going. And I think that's going to keep Charlottesville growing and positive. And I think that's how we're going to get out of this.
Great. What about the office sector? I know we have, three or four or five pretty significant projects in the city on top of the Mullen Mills project Roger referenced. And I know the ones that were already underway, as you said, we're able to keep going on the construction side. But what are you seeing in terms of leasing? And maybe it's too early to tell right now how all of our changing work from home habits and successes might be impacting that. But do you have what are your predictions?
So, I think it's going to be a little bit of a give and take. I think obviously from the near-term transactions, I think people that hadn't signed their leases obviously are going to really look at how they're designing the space. And I think some of the benching and stuff that, you've seen in the tech sector recently, I think a lot of that small open office, small distances and open office, I think that environment will change and it'll get back to some of the office furniture with larger walls, some more private offices, some more circulation within the space. So, in the near term, I think you'll see people leasing a little bit less space overall, just from an economic standpoint. But I think you'll see probably a 10% growth in, how much space each employee gets. So I think it'll take about probably 6 months to really understand the impact of this on the office environment. All of the office developments in Charlottesville are still in a great spot. 323 Dairy, Apex, Code, they're all, fairly well leased up in the cycle that they're in. And so I think we won't really see a big problem. We'll see a little bit of vacancy and a little bit of shift, out of Willow Tree moving over to Mullen Mills. But they really, they're really not leaving that much backfill space. So I think it won't, optically, it won't be a big problem in Charlottesville. I think the big potential problem would be some of the retail and hospitality stuff being a little bit slow and vacant.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Deborah's here with us as well with the UVA Foundation, and they've got a lot of their own projects and new buildings coming on. And tell us what you can predict with regard to the foundation's projects, or what you're seeing, Deborah, in terms of leasing or any changes out there.
So I think it's safe to say that I would agree with most everything that's been said by my colleagues here. The UVA Foundation is involved in a fair amount of real estate on behalf of the University of Virginia. And everyone knows the university is they're sort of pulling back on their capital projects, really looking at each one of those individually to understand if it's important to move them forward. In the UVA Research Park, we are completing our Town Center 4 building. I'm actually in front of a picture of our new meeting center, but we haven't really opened it yet. We were to have had a ribbon cutting tomorrow for this building, which has been delayed now due to COVID. But we have a very good tenant base in the research park. We've got a 600,000 square feet of office product and lab product, and most of our tenants, if not all of them, are just very good quality tenants and large. And so we've had very little noise, if you will, as it relates to their concerns about real estate. In fact, we've been fielding a number of inquiries and requests for proposals for more space and or expansion space on the part of our tenants. So to what Robert was saying, I feel like that's kind of a good thing. You know, we're really kind of seeing some positive movement. Having said that, back to some of the comments that Chris made, you know, we're really trying to create sort of place out in the research park. It's not downtown, right? And to a group at ULI, I presented sort of our new master plan, which included restaurant and fitness center and a shuttle bus, which is transportation, and you know, the potential someday for some residential and a hotel. And all these industries have been largely impacted now by COVID, right? So we've had to close our restaurant, we've halted our shuttle bus, we're delaying our opening of our building, the meeting space, and the fitness center, because nobody really knows how we're going to come back together in these spaces in a safe way. So from the standpoint of development, we're holding steady, and we're seeing people asking us about potential growth and more space. On the downside, we're trying to figure out how we're going to bring people back to their offices after largely most are telecommuting. Most of our tenants have their folks telecommuting. So how do we bring people back and ensure them that we're doing that safely in that space? So we're going to be cautious, of course, if it comes to projects that would require capital outlay. And we'll be evaluating, like Robert said, you know, what's the capacity for folks to you know, enter into these large development projects. So again, I would just reiterate all the things that had been said originally.
So I think that's a great introduction to this. One of the things I did want to remind everyone is that there is the opportunity to throw out some questions in there's a Q&A box and there's a chat box on the bottom. If you want to throw things out, we'll try to incorporate those questions. It looks like there's a couple for Robert, but before we look at those questions, I did want to throw out to both Roger and Chris, you know, going into 2020 and really for years before that, there was so much momentum in the Charlottesville development construction community. What are you seeing on the county and the city, on the city side, that kind of to continue to support that and, you know, keep that momentum going, and talk a little bit, not just about maybe the construction and development community, but also maybe some of the other, you know, market sectors, whether it's retail, industrial, whatever it may be. I know there's been some touch on a few of the projects that are moving forward, Woolen Mills, 323 Dairy. How are you guys, you know, seeing the localities support that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that, Craig. And you're right, the momentum locally was significant for a number of years. And in fact, the last 10 years, there's been $1.5 billion invested in the city, and that's across residential and commercial. 2019 was the high watermark for commercial investment, $145 million just in last year. And that's reflective of the four major projects that were mentioned earlier that are continuing, and we're lucky where they were in the cycle, so that those construction jobs can stay in place and they can come online. Those four projects represent a significant, not even really the right word, but 500,000 square feet of new office space in the city of our sizes is unheard of. The last Class A office space that was built was in 2009, and it was 15,000 square feet. So just to put a little perspective there, we're getting a lot of new inventory in the Class A office space. So that's, I think, good news. We were also at the lowest unemployment level that we've had in 12 years, the highest number of jobs, and we had actually seen some wage growth across all sectors. So you're right when you suggest that there was momentum moving into this. Hopefully we have a short period of downturn, and then we kind of return to some level of momentum, but that's kind of an open question. You know, the question about retail and hospitality, those are certainly impacted and are probably of significant concern for this region, given our reliance on that piece of the economy. About 30 to 40% of our economy is service oriented, and certainly hospitality and retail falls in those buckets. I do want to mention, while we have a moment, the city and county have been working together on a number of initiatives outside of real estate, given the kind of the relief efforts needed for businesses. And one of those is a loan fund. Robert's been talking about the PPP, which has been great for a lot of companies, not so great for others, and realizing that there's likely a gap locally, the county took the initiative to put forth some funds, as well as the city EDA, to support what we're calling the Business Recovery Fund, which is operational now. It's being operated by the Charlotte's Community Investment Collaborative, CIC, which most of you will recognize as a longtime member of the community and a provider of entrepreneurial training, as well as microloans. So they have stepped up to manage that. There's $300,000 in that fund right now, and we're very hopeful that there are some private sector dollars to come alongside of that and leverage those dollars even further. Applications are being accepted as we speak for the first round, which those loans will be happening over the next couple of weeks once the first application period closes. So wanted to make sure people were aware of that as we have this conversation.
I think it would be of interest for you all to know what the county is actually doing to help the local construction industry. We are doing it really through process improvements, collaboration, and support. And I'll give you a couple of examples of those. We have two new leaders in community development, Jody Filardo and Charles Rapp, who I believe is going to join the call today. I hope they're listening in. They have asked economic development to partner with them to take a look at our expedited review processes in ways we may be able to administratively and or process changes improve both the certainty of outcomes as well as the length of time it takes for a project to get through the review. So that's that project is about to launch. Charles Rapp is taking the lead on that with his team, and you'll probably hear more about that in the development community. We are collaborating with many partners in the community, and that's evident by the recent influx of public-private partnerships. We generally partner with a large development firm who is willing to include a societal benefit. And when we do so, it helps the process move forward at a quicker rate, assuming zoning goes well. And then I think there's been a great deal of talk about retail. And I'd like to mention that yesterday evening, the county received a report from a consultant named Retail Strategies. We spent roughly $100,000 out of economic development to hire Retail Strategies. And they conducted both a market study, a downtown Crozet evaluation, as well as we'll spend the next 2 years helping our community recruit new retailers to fill the vacant space and or soon to be built space. I think there's a couple highlights in there that are interesting that I'd like to share. And that includes that retail is not dying the way many people are reading. In fact, those retailers that do omni-channeling, and that's a nice way for saying do e-commerce, brick and mortar store, direct mailing, use social media and other channels, some of those are actually thriving. They're growing in this particular market. While it is true there's a little Darwinian aspect going on and some small businesses are dying, those small businesses that already had omni-channeling are not. They're moving forward. Obviously the restaurant industry, some of the boutique clothing industries are struggling, and there's evidence of that as well. And in fact, this is 130 rough pages of a report. I'm not going to regurgitate all of that, but what I will pledge to do is send a link to Craig Katarski about that particular retail study, and Craig can forward that out to everyone else. But they will be looking at vacant properties. They will be helping the development community fill those particular spaces, helping them recruit. And by recruit, I mean they have market flyers that they will be sending to retailers to include attending events like Recon and ICSC and so forth. So even if you're not at those particular events as a commercial broker or a developer or a property manager, the county's working on your behalf to to fill in those storefronts. So those are at least 3 things. There's many more things we're doing. And I want to just point out while I have the mic, Valerie, is what's maybe not seen as much publicly is the city, the county, the UVA, the University of Virginia, and the Chamber are working diligently together to better our community. I think it's important to recognize we're all oaring in the same direction, and our actions are meeting our video. Thank you.
Roger, I think that's great, and I'm happy if you are able to send me that report. I'm happy to send that out to everybody who has signed up for this and is online with us. Robert, I was going to kick it over to you. There were a few questions on the chat that I thought you might weigh in on. One is in regard to PPP loans and how are they affecting lenders' ability to offer mortgages and financing, and then another one is in regards to interest rates for site work and construction loans. And interested if you might weigh in on those from your perspective.
Sure, happy to. I'll answer them in order. So how will the PPP loans affect lenders' ability to offer mortgages and financing? Because of some of the facilities set up by the Fed, it's not impacting liquidity, which is a good thing. So initially there was a big concern about liquidity. I think, they opened up on a Friday, and by Saturday, Wells Fargo said, we're at our cap. And that was by like Saturday evening or something like that. So in less than really, 2 days, they were out. But the Fed opened up a purchasing program, which basically created unlimited liquidity for the banks for these loans, which was great. I would say the only ability is time, and just that we have limited resources. We're not, the banks are still working full capacity, which is great. But at the end of the day, there's only but so much time in any given day. I know my staff is working, 6 to 7 days a week at a minimum, and, substantially more hours than they've ever worked before, just trying to keep up with the PPP loans. So it is creating a backlog for our ability to offer mortgages and financing. But so what I would say is, as soon as these kind of wrap up, which I think by Friday, the end of the first rush of the second round of financing for the PPP loans should be finished. So then everything will settle out. I mean, there's still, I would say, a steady stream, but nothing like the backlog that was set and ready for entry the first 2 days. The 10 days out, which is the max period under which you have to fund these things, is over as of Thursday. For the first 2 days. So I guess today is our kind of second day of entry. The system, actually, they purposely put up on the SBA system a pacing, so you could only enter but so many. It started telling you you can't enter another loan again until 11 a.m. today, just in order to make sure that everybody was able to get them in, and no one bank could clog the system. So hopefully I've answered that question. On the interest rates, it's a really, really good question. So yes, interest rates as a whole are down. When we mean that, the underlying interest rates, if you're looking at the 5-year, the 10-year, all those rates are down right now. Now, on the flip side of that, we're seeing spreads widen a little bit, and that's because risk has increased. So usually all loans on the commercial side are based on a risk-based spread over an index. So as risk increases, the spread increases. But with that said, we're still seeing very, very low rates across the board for both standard commercial loans and construction.
Thanks, Robert. John, would you maybe talk a little bit, I know we talked a little bit about, obviously we've touched on the struggles with retail here recently. Can you talk a little bit about the trends that you're seeing and what you think may, continue to do? Maybe there are trends that are only starting to take off now, but trends that could continue to build, after we sort of get through this crisis?
Yeah, I think the one simple macro level thing to look at in Charlottesville is we just simply don't have enough housing units at all different price points and all different levels. This restricts kind of mobility up and down. The prices, obviously with more units, it is more competitive on pricing. If with less units, it's just going to be more expensive. It's pretty, pretty simple economics. I think, when you get into some situation like this pandemic, people obviously are losing their jobs, and there is not a lot of options for them to move up or down to shift their price point of their housing. And, I think the landlords are doing everything they can to be supportive. The banks are being supportive of the landlords, and everyone's working together to make this as, friendly and ease everybody through this process as quickly as possible. But I think that's one of the big issues that we're going to see now and in the next 10, 15 years. Obviously, we don't have enough really developable land here, but we also have very tight development areas within that. So the combination is just restrictive. I think on the retail side, you're going to see a lot of people trying to lease smaller spaces. People are going to be worried that they're going to have to do more takeout, or they're going to have to hire less people. Obviously, there's a lot of income and just cash that has been wiped out of that industry and that sector. So people are going to be really, really trying to have as little overhead as possible. And that comes down to, operational costs. That's employees. You're going to have, people trying to have less rent and less just things to manage. And I think that's going to be a big focus, moving forward. I think on the office space, office space is tricky, because I think that there's a lot of people thinking that they can work from home. Obviously the productivity is a little bit, it's a little bit like, I know for a fact that I am not as productive working from home. And I think people think that they are, but I think at the true level, it's each company is going to, set their own rules and determine really from a company level how productive each person can be. And so I think people will end up back in the office. I think you'll have a little bit more flexibility, certainly in the near term, but I think people will end up moving back into offices. I think obviously the jurisdictions, my assumption would be they're going to be a little bit more pro-development during this cycle because of the sales tax hit that they're seeing, because that's the quickest way to get it back, get it back up. And I know that the concept of how the taxes work for property tax is offsetting some of the jurisdictional burden that each unit could create. But, at the end of the day, a lot of the people don't really use, all the services as one would think. So that's kind of high level what I'm seeing. I think all of our new projects probably will end up benefiting at some level just because they are a little bit more efficiently designed. Like the big office space, you can lay out an office to, fit your real needs from your corporation, rather than some of the offices that we have on the mall on the second level, for example, are tight, have a lot of corners, have a lot of columns. And so that dictates really how you can design the space. Whereas the new offices, you can really comfortably design it. I think, with the smaller retail spaces, you'll see things like, the food hall at the dairy, that'll allow people to be really nimble and really be able to open a small restaurant, owner operator, without a lot of investment, and be able to do delivery, takeout, eat in, and service that whole business line that has popped up. So, I mean, I think simplistically, that's not a really simple answer, but I think that's the path.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think especially with what you were talking about in regards to office space, I mean, we constantly have the conversation within our own organization. And I think while there is some ability to reach a certain level of efficiency, it's also really hard to train some entry level or some younger, in our particular case, engineers, because you're just not in the same room. So you are limited in how you teach and how you train and bring staff up. Deborah, on your side, how do you see sort of momentum going for the foundation? You guys, you're working along with, you're kind of working alongside each of these other panelists that we have, whether it's with the city or the county or, commercial real estate and lending. How's momentum going for you all in not only maybe locations like the research park, but also like at Boar's Head from a hospitality side?
Yeah, well, good question. What I would say is, well, we'll start with the research park and go to the Boar's Head. I mean, at the research park, you know, our momentum up to COVID was pretty stellar. We were finishing a building. We were putting our road through into Airport Road. We were extending our sewer line. Opening the area near the airport road was intentional, as we were going to be welcoming the Encompass Rehab Hospital that would be relocating up to the park, but also it was opening up a good swath of land within the park that we kind of hoped would be, and continue to hope will be, a mixed use development, including some residential, back to some question about housing stock. That's still all in the works. I think we're just all wondering about timing. And I appreciate the commentary so far about sort of it's not all doom and gloom, but it's going to be sort of a phased return to normal. I think our biggest concern, just to tag on something John talked about, is not only are we developers, but we're also property management, asset management firms. So our biggest concern as it relates to our office folks is to really bring them back into a safe environment. And we monitor lots of resources and the issue of whether or not we can be socially distanced, how we clean our buildings, how we act within these common areas. And I hate to say it, but how people individually respect others' space, which is not always easy. I can wear a mask. If others don't, then do I feel comfortable coming back? And a lot of our tenants are going to be asking those questions. Have we changed out mechanical systems? Do we have filters in our HVAC system that would prevent the spread of germs and disease? So, you know, all these are very important property management concerns that we also are concerned about. As it relates to the Boar's Head, I'm sure all of you know that we had to actually close down our resort entirely in the early part of April. We had to furlough over 200 employees. We were thankful to get a PPP loan, and now we've been able to start bringing people back to work on critical parts of the operation. We're really looking into the future. It's hospitality industry is probably one of the hardest hit across the nation, and probably some of the first groups to get in line for the PPP money. We employ a lot of people in our community. Normally we have as many as 450 employees at high season, which is over the summertime. We're looking at having about 200, 250 of those back by the time we essentially reopen for what we would call a new normal business. So it's definitely been an impact in the community. We have gone to great lengths to take care of our people, and we're hopeful that the business will come back as soon as possible. We do think there's an opportunity for us where you don't have to get on a plane if you're in Washington, D.C. to come back to Charlottesville for a nice weekend to be in a hotel. So I do think there's some opportunity for some of us in Charlottesville, being the community that we are, having UVA here, quality of life that we have. So we are a destination that's easy to get to without having to get on a plane. Some of our properties that we manage on behalf of the university are multifamily or restaurants. Those are the multifamily or the apartment complexes that we have largely depend on students coming back, because we own those properties on behalf of the university. So we're crossing our fingers that we'll be able to bring students back to the community. And that would, of course, as you mentioned earlier, that would impact the entire community in a very positive way. So we too are looking at that. As it relates to restaurants and our sports club and our golf course. So the golf course is easy. You can imagine it's easier to social distance in the community in this time and age with COVID. A little bit more difficult as it relates to sitting down in restaurants and eating and or working out in a gym. So we're, again, working through all of that. From the standpoint of momentum, it's still sort of unpredictable yet, Craig. I mean, we're waiting to see really what happens at the university level, and that really is dependent on what CDC, the Biocomplexity Institute, which is an organization in the research park, has been advising the governor and the university on, the spread of COVID and what to expect when the peaks are and when people will come out. I would just say, we've done surveys and we've seen surveys from other organizations. You know, our folks are probably most concerned with their health and safety as it relates to coming back sort of out of our cocoons. People like working at home, but they also are a little concerned about how we come back safely as a community. And I think that's going to be largely the big driver as we think about how we come out of this as an economy.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all going to be struggling with that. Thanks, everybody. We've got a couple other questions that have come in while we've been talking. Here's one that's kind of aimed at Roger and Chris, and that is a question about what are the city and county doing to attract new employers to the market? The office space absorption that we've been seeing is almost exclusively local companies growing into new space. So maybe you guys could address that question for us.
Yes, I'll go first. That's all right. Valerie, the county adopted a strategic plan for economic development called Project Enable. And in that particular project, it included community engagement and feedback. And in that process, our community of Albemarle County said that we want you to focus on growing existing businesses. We want you to focus on helping them succeed, providing the resources and support necessary for them to be successful and fill in the gaps in the ecosystem. In fact, we were expressly instructed not to go out and actively recruit new industries into the county, to focus our efforts on growing those businesses and helping the organic growth. As a result of that, what we're doing to fill office space is partnering with the University of Virginia and the city and the chamber to launch a couple of initiatives. There's one called Catalyst, where we're helping small startup nascent organizations grow. The second is called Venture Central, which is a business plan to fill in gaps in our ecosystem. It's a physical place as well as a combination of process, programs, mentorship, access to capital. So startup businesses here locally can grow and fill in the gaps, including Class A office space. And then the third thing I'll mention is a little nuanced, but there are some experts who are predicting that as a result of the COVID pandemic and the ability to work more remotely, that places that actually are considered a place will have more successful filling of their Class A office space, as those folks will migrate from maybe large urban cities into places they'd rather live, because they've found that some of the work they can do can be done remotely. So the short answer is we're not actively recruiting industries as Albemarle County. We have a different plan and a different strategy based off of the feedback from our community as well as the board's approval.
Yeah, I'll just add that first, I think it's a good thing that local companies are filling this space. It proves that we have a vibrant ecosystem here that can generate growth. Understand the question, though, of filling and dealing with absorption. And, you know, we haven't, as I referenced earlier, haven't had this situation or problem, if you will, for many, many years. And honestly, our budget doesn't allow to do significant marketing or attraction type of thing. So we rely on our partners, which include CVPED locally, which is Central Virginia Partnership for Economic Development, as well as the state initiative, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. And on that front, they are actually about to embark upon an effort to reach out to places like New York City and others where this pandemic has hit, and there are lots of offices that might be interested in kind of you know, adjusting their environment based on that, and making pitches to them about Virginia, which will include places like a Charlottesville that has available, at least in the near term, as some of this new space comes online, we'll have some available office space in an environment that is a little different. And you know, we've always been kind of attractive to companies that want to move out of a DC or a New York, and they see this as an opportunity to make that pitch again. So we're partnering with them on that, but the state and our regional group really take the lead.
So can I add one thing to that? I just want to shout out to Roger and Chris and our partners at the Central Virginia Partnership for Economic Development. Last year, all of the counties that were members or members of the CVPED group presented land to be certified by the state as ready sites, different tier levels. And I know that in the research park, we were certified as a tier 4 ready site for a large site of 200 acres or more. And so the state is using that and promoting those to site selection professionals all around the country and promoting our region for expansion or for potential opportunities. I know just recently we were put up as a research park for a 3-building campus type situation as a result of that program. So I do think there is a lot going on. We don't always see it, but there definitely is a lot going on at the state level and at our regional level.
Well, thanks everyone. One thing I wanted to do before we close out is just go back around the panel and give everyone 30 seconds to a minute just for some last words. Deborah, why don't I kick it right back over to you, and then we'll go around.
Well, so I'm the eternal optimist. I'm a marketer by nature, very positive, and I feel like the opportunity, there's no need to waste this crisis. It could be an opportunity for everybody, and as painful as it has been, and it will continue to be for many, we're learning a lot about society and about ourselves and what's important to us as a community. We're looking at all of our systems and taking advantage of the moment to sort of evaluate what we do and how we do it. I do believe people need to be social, need to be out and about, and will, as much as we love being at home, some days are better than others. We do need that interaction, and we do need to collaborate with people, and it is far easier to do that in person. I do believe that things will be back to normal. I do think it will take us a little more time than what perhaps we would like it to be. And I think, again, largely that's going to be related to how safe we feel one among each other. And I think that is just incumbent upon us to be very responsible in the way we come out of the situation from a health standpoint. And thanks for the opportunity.
Chris, you want to jump in?
Sure. Happy to follow Deborah. My thoughts are in line with hers as a glass half full type of person. At the end of the day, humans are social beings. They want to be together. They want to collaborate. They need to do that. So I think we'll get back to that. The other piece that I would add is that, as we've talked about, we were riding some momentum coming into this, and the fundamentals of the economy here in this community have always been strong. They've always been, through every up and down, we tend to weather it a little better than other places, largely because of the stability of the university and some of the associated activity with that. So the fundamentals were strong, and there's no reason they can't come back in a strong way. It will take some time. There will be some, what we call creative destruction. There will be it'll look different. And don't know exactly what that looks like, but have faith that we, as a community, we'll get through it, and we'll be stronger at the end.
Roger, you want to take the baton?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. And it's hard for me to follow Chris. He's always so eloquent. I'll mention a couple of things that may be of interest to the group. The fundamentals that Chris was mentioning about focusing on in economic development include some specific strategies for helping small businesses be successful. We focus on primary businesses, Willow Tree, Northrop Grumman, those folks that produce a good or service locally, sell it outside of our community, bringing all that new wealth back in. And it allows those, and then it's spent at the boutiques and the coffee shops and other things that make our communities so great. We are still doing that. Unfortunately, the county had to also adjust its programs and policies to help existing businesses survive. Undoubtedly, the COVID pandemic has damaged the amount of successful small businesses we have in our community. So Chris mentioned the microloan as one example. I'd like to just mention that we're also working on a project called Project Rebound. It's a collaboration between the city, the county, UVA, the chamber, and then there's now over 300 volunteers who are participating in some way, shape, or form. And that's actively engaging the community to restart the economy as quickly and safely as possible so that some of those businesses that are hanging on by a thread have a greater likelihood of success. The best thing that we can do for our economy is help our existing businesses succeed as opposed to necessarily trying to fill in with new businesses. I'm just so pleased that we have good partners in our community that are working together to make this happen.
Then let's go to Robert and we'll finish with Johnny.
Sure. Thank you again for the opportunity. I think, what everybody has said is right. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism on the back end of it. I think some of the lag effects are going to be interesting. It's going to, I think June 15 is when UVA has said that they're hoping to make a decision on, right? If UVA students and faculty aren't back, that's a huge amount of spending that could be interesting. But with that said, I think at the end of the day, banks as a whole are still moving forward. They're still trying to find ways to do deals. When it comes to trying to help out our existing borrowers, I know for us, we've already deferred or modified $1.2 billion in loans on the commercial side, another $115 million in loans on the consumer side. So for those who have been significantly impacted, whether the businesses had to be shut down by the government or, whether they were furloughed, you have to reach out. You have to ask. Relationships matter now more than ever. They always have. And I think relationships throughout the process. So as we talk about development, knowing that every party through the deal can step up and honor their commitments is going to be as important as it ever has been. Again, we're excited. We're still looking at new deals. We're seeing a lot of opportunities. We're doing everything we can and, are really looking forward to the PPP loan program being through and, again, want as many people as they can. So hopefully everybody heard there's still, over 120 billion in funding out there. So if people know of other businesses that haven't gotten the funding, banks are still open for that. Please reach out to me or anybody else. We just want to make sure you get the funding. It doesn't matter who you get it through. So, again, please, this is a tough time, but I think, the optimism is important. I think working hard to make sure everybody's pulling together, everybody's pulling their weight, and everybody's being respectful of different situations is important.
Johnny.
So I agree with everyone. I think we are going to come out of this better than we were before. I think what we need to focus on is what made Charlottesville so vibrant and so great is our support of the local and small businesses that we used to frequent all the time. I think something that we should do and everyone on this call should do is over this next 4 days, this weekend, make sure you go and eat out, buy a gift certificate from a small retailer, make sure you show that support because, the more support we show now, the better it's going to be for everyone as we come out of this. It's a really simple thing to do. You're going to eat. That's just something that happens. You're probably going to drink just given the environment that we're in. And so we should buy that from someone else and keep dollars flowing. So, support everybody that and be friendly, and we'll all be out there soon.
We want to thank everyone for being a part of this panel. Valerie, I was going to ask if you had any last words you wanted to share before we close off.
Not anything too much. I appreciate everybody's particular insights. It's really, it's so helpful to see how everything kind of fits together as we all move forward to help bring the city and county back. And as I think Robert said, relationships matter so much more now, more than ever. It's great to see that the city and the county and the university are all working so well together. Obviously the private sector and all the design community that's on the call and beyond desperately want to do their part as well to help partner with those agencies and help, move the city and county back to where we were. And as Johnny said, end up in a better place than we were before this all started. So here's to that. And thanks to everybody for the good questions that you sent while we were talking. It was really helpful, and hope everybody enjoyed it. And I think, Craig, you were going to mention something about certificates and credits for those who qualify. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I'll just echo that one more time. If you are in need of continuing educational credits, we actually offered it for this. And then we also on our website, timmons.com, we have a whole bunch of, we have a schedule of things that are coming up. I would just, in closing, I would echo, I think Robert said something great the other day when we were on the phone kind of prepping for this, and it was that relationships matter all the way through. And I think that hasn't changed just because we're all working remotely. I think it's important to engage in those relationships. And then the last thing I was just going to say, kind of anecdotally, I'm reading a book called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and one of the taglines of the book is "Impediment to action is action." And I think, you know, Johnny, you just talked about it with regards to supporting local businesses. We've all kind of just touched on these ways that, yeah, there may be this impediment to typical business as usual, but we're getting through it and we're moving forward. So I really appreciate everyone being on this panel, joining us online, and hope everyone has a great rest of their morning and a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.